This award season, consider Conclave. Ralph Fiennes and a stellar ensemble cast burn up the screen in director Edward Berger's stunning cinematic achievement, Conclave. Hailed by AFI as one of the year's best pictures and nominated for 11 Critics' Choice Awards, including Best Picture of the Year. Conclave, your choice changes everything. Happy Saturday. It is January 4th, 2025, and you are listening to Morning Meeting. I'm Ashley Baker in London.
And I'm Michael Haney in New York City.
And Michael, it is a new year, but it is the same old us. And I feel very optimistic for one. I think we're going to have a really good one. I mean, despite, some intriguing developments politically, we have to just try to keep the energy up. And on that note, Michael, we have a great first issue of the year for you.
We do, and as you note, it's the beginning of a new year. It's time for resolutions, perhaps, and if you're thinking of taking some time to reflect on what you want to do this year, well, Pico Iyer is going to join us to share what he learned during his time at a secluded monastery perched high above the Pacific. Then, if seclusion is less your thing and indulgence is where you live, LeDonne joins us from Williamsburg, New York, the neighborhood where almost everything has changed except for Bamonte's restaurant, the beloved 125-year-old Italian institution that is hotter than ever. And finally, Ernest Hemingway's A Farewell to Arms is one of the literary masterpieces of the last 100 years, and Amanda Vaill will share the story of the unrequited love story that inspired Hemingway to write his novel. So Ashley, where would you like to begin today?
Let's talk to Pico Iyer. Pico Iyer is a columnist for Airmail and the author of many irresistible books, including A Beginner's Guide to Japan and Autumn Light, which are two of my favorites. His new one is called A Flame Learning from Silence, and it's out on January 14th. Welcome, Pico. Welcome, Pico.
Yes, so nice to see you both again.
We thought that the holidays were over, but it turns out the gifts keep on giving because you have a new book that has just come out. It's called A Flame Learning from Silence. What's it all about?
It's about the improbable thing of me spending 100 retreats over 33 years with a group of Catholic monks in Big Sur, California. I'm not a Christian. I'm not a religious person. I'm not really a hermit, but there I am in this radiant hermitage again and again, just because I found it's the best medicine and the best indulgence and probably the best holiday I can think of.
And how did you first discover it?
My house had burnt down in one of those wildfires that regularly tear through the hills of California. And so for many months I was sleeping on a friend's floor as slowly we began to reconstruct our lives. And another friend came in and saw me on the floor. I said, "Come on, Pico, you can do better than this." And he told me that if I just drove 3.5 hours up the coast, I could have a bed of my own, a big desk, a private walled garden, amazing ocean views, food, showers, everything, just for $30 a night. And I thought, oh, what's there to lose? And I remember the last time the three of us spoke, we were talking about English boarding schools. And, I went through 15 years in Anglican cloisters. Chapel every morning, chapel every evening, the Lord's Prayer in Latin on Sunday nights, the Gospel according to Matthew in Greek in the daytime. So after all that, I thought, I've had enough crosses and hymnals to last me a lifetime. And so the notion of going to a Catholic retreat house was not so appealing. I went really in spite of the fact it was a Catholic place rather than because of that, only to find that the monks are probably the least dogmatic souls I'll ever meet. They're much less dogmatic than I and my friends are. And that also there are no rules in this place. Anybody who comes, and I'd say the majority of people who stay are women, is free to, you can do anything. You can just take walks along the beautiful road above the Pacific Ocean. You can read, you can write letters, you can just crash out. And although there are services 5 times a day and the monks will offer counsel if needed, it's the rare respite where you can really find whatever you most need.
Given your loyalty there and the fact that you returned so many times, did you make any friends, whether, among your fellow visitors or among the monks themselves?
So many. And the first surprise was, although you're sitting alone in a simple room, I've never felt less alone. And when I walk along the road and I meet, as it were, a fellow traveler, someone else who's staying, we'll exchange a couple of words. And oddly, I quickly feel that person is one of my closest friends in the world because the words are coming from a very deep place. And we're join not just by where we happen to go to school or where we live or what job we're doing, but by the fact we sought out this silence and this radiance. And so we're sort of joined at a very deep level. Nowadays, when the retreat rooms are full, I stay with the monks. So I've got to know the monks very, very well over 33 years. And it's touching, first, that they will allow me as a non-Christian to stay with them. And secondly, they'll come to my room and they'll share with me all their doubts and fears and frustrations. And when I finished my book, I actually sent it to 2 monks to see if I'd got anything wrong, because they're committed to anonymity and I didn't want to trespass upon their privacy. And one of them had really told me a lot about what was so difficult in his life. And I thought that he might understandably want me to take all of that out. And he wrote back to me very sweetly and he said, no, our main gift to the world is we're so broken, we're so human, we're so fallible. So please don't take out any of the parts where I share my anxieties and fears. That's the core of our life.
And Pico, how did this 33-year adventure change your own spiritual beliefs, or did it?
I'm not sure if it changed my spiritual beliefs, but I hope it changed my actions, which in some ways I think are even more important than my beliefs, and changed my values and what I think it really reoriented me in terms of what's important. I think before I'd been much more caught up on the sort of treadmill of wanting to decorate my resume as much as possible. And being there made me think, is that what's really going to make me happy? Maybe just being here where I'm sitting and talking to you in a tiny apartment in the middle of nowhere, Japan, with very few distractions, but the day that lasts 1,000 hours, maybe that'll make me more happy than racing along and to catch the next taxi in Midtown Manhattan. So I think it has changed me in all kinds of ways. And of course, now, for example, when I'm in an airport, and like both of you, I spend a lot of my time in airports, I've learned just to find some quiet place in the sun and just sit there. And suddenly the whole thing becomes much less stressful. Or nowadays, I take many more walks than I used to, and I found that that's one of the great indulgences of my day. So I think it's changed me a lot. And I think one reason that after 33 years, I suddenly decided to bring out this book was partly because the world is so distracted and accelerated, much more than when I first went in 1991, when most of us didn't know about the internet. There were no smartphones, no social media. But also, as both of you know so well, the world is so much more divided than it's ever been. And I feel that it's often our words and beliefs that keep us at odds. And beneath all that, there's some silence that we share. When you share a moment of silence in a large group, often that group is brought together at some much deeper level. And as soon as we start talking politics or religion, we're conducting an argument. But beneath that, there may be some place where we're all sharing the same silence or the same concerns. And also, finally, I think so many of my friends are so distraught now and so worried. And it's been very touching for me to spend time with these monks who have this absolute confidence. So, because quite often they're encircled by wildfires too. And then 2 or 3 monks will stay behind to try to help the firefighters protect their home. And they'll send out bulletins to their concerned friends. And I remember at one point, maybe 3 years ago, the prior was in the middle of the fire. And he said in his daily report, we can see smoke everywhere and the flames are just rising up behind the ridges behind us and they're 100 yards away. But don't worry, we're maintaining our offices. We're going about our life as usual. Blessed day all. Blessed day all, he said, the day that looked like he might have his home and his entire life destroyed. So at a time when people are losing hope, being in the company of people who have such strong hope is really uplifting.
And Pico, what kind of technology is allowed when you go there? I mean, is your cell phone wrested from you the minute that you arrive, or how does that work?
It's a very good question. As I say, there are no rules there, but happily, I think for most people, there's no cell phone reception. There's no internet, really. Of course, there's no television. And the only thing they say is, please, would you be quiet? So people aren't playing radios there. But conversation is allowed. And they say, well, why don't you walk along the beautiful monastery road, 900 acres of wilderness above the ocean if you want to talk to somebody. And of course, you're welcome to go into the monastery bookstore and chat with a monk or seek out a monk and take a long walk with him to talk. But you are free of technology. And of course, everyone who's going there is choosing to take their cell phone away from themselves. So the monks don't have to intervene in any form. And it's not clearly for everybody. And there have been times when I've been there during a sudden torrential winter storm. And all night the rain beats on my roof and the wind shakes the flimsy foundations of this little wooden trailer on a hill. And I look outside and I can't see a single light or sign of human habitation. It can be scary then, and it's and lonely. And I know that just to get a carton of milk from the retreat house kitchen, I'm going to have to walk through the storm. And of course, also when you're in silence by yourself, shadows and traumas and demons can come out. But even so, I'd rather they came out there than when I'm in rush hour traffic or racing from the bank to the pharmacy in my everyday life. But it does make me admire the courage of the monks, because when it is scary there, it's scary for me when I'm staying for 3 days and I'm realizing they're staying there for 50 years with nowhere to run and nowhere to hide.
Pico is one of your many dedicated, ardent, very loyal readers. I couldn't help but wonder as I was reading your new book, how, your visits to this place have informed the writing of your many books and essays. I mean, when you go there, are you actively working on your next project, or is this a moment for you to reset?
I like that. I like that question. I think it's the only place in my life where I allow myself not to write and not to work. It's even when I'm on holiday, you probably know this feeling. I map out every minute, and the holiday is really just work in disguise because I've got such a fearsome itinerary. But that's the rare place where I let anything happen or nothing happen. And I sometimes do nothing at all, which is something I never allow myself to do otherwise. So when I'm there, it's the most creative and stimulating place I know. And so I can't stop scribbling. But at some point I realized none of my scribbles would be of use to anybody else, because they sound like somebody whispering to himself in an empty room high above the clouds, partly because it is that. I am more or less whispering to myself in an empty room high above the clouds. So although I cover hundreds of pages there, none of them are useful to anybody else. But I think it probably over all these years has changed the way I write. And since you've actually had to endure this new book, you probably saw that it's almost like a haiku. It's very compressed. And I was taking maybe 4,000 pages of notes and turning them into as short a book as I could. So I think it's allowed me to admit much more silence into my writing than I have before, which is a way of inviting the reader in. So I'm not lecturing at the poor reader, but I'm really inviting her into some kind of shared communion or conversation, and giving her the chance to complete my sentences or take some suggestion I throw out and take it wherever she needs to take it.
You're reminding me, the Buddhists talk about the monkey mind, right? And the always racing mind. And, the allure of what you do is that we all have this dream, like I'll get there and everything I'll calm my mind. I'm touched by what you say about being able to then sort of take that out into the world. Has that been a big part of your daily practice, trying to sort of calm your mind then when you're not there?
Yes, that's such a good question again. And it gives me an intimation of what could happen if I do still the monkey mind. My monkey mind is more furious than anyone's. It's always swinging from the branches and doing somersaults. And in fact, the big liberation I find when I go there is not just being liberated from internet and social media, but being liberated from myself and all my little chatter. Because every time I drive up, as usual, I'm fretting about deadlines and feeling guilty about leaving my loved ones behind, or worried, my friends at ML can't get hold of me for 72 hours. How are they going to survive? And as soon as I get there, all of that falls away. And as you said, the monkey mind is put to sleep. And of course, as soon as I drive back, the monkey mind is awake again. But as you suggest, slowly over the years, I've tried to find ways in my regular life of putting it to sleep. For example, when I'm waiting for my wife to come back from work now, instead of scrolling through the internet or watching TV, I'll turn off all the lights and just listen to some music. And it's amazing how much calmer I feel when I hear her key in the door, and how much better I sleep, actually, and how much less jangled I am when I wake up. So, as you say, it's reminded me of the importance of taming my monkey mind, because my monkey mind actually doesn't really do me much good. And I think all it does is cut the world up into you and me. It's my monkey mind that says, I know more than that guy, or I'm furious with my neighbor because he voted this way, or he has a different faith than mine. And my heart and spirit are probably a little wiser than that, I hope. So.
Well, anyone who reads your writing knows that that's absolutely true. Pico, I can't thank you enough for joining us, and also for writing this marvelous new book, and also for all of your books that if anyone's walking into 2025 feeling perplexed, confused, flummoxed, and needing a reset, start with A Beginner's Guide to Japan, my personal favorite, and then go through the entire of.
Oh, that's so kind of you, Ashley. Thank you. And yeah, I hope you have a really wonderful 2025, and then it brings less distraction and sorrow to us all.
Thank you, Pico.
Thank you so much, Pico.
All right, well, moving on, Michael, let's go in a very different direction. Let's go to Williamsburg, Brooklyn, where Rob LeDonne has the story of Bamonte's. It is a Brooklyn institution, and after 125 years, it's more popular than ever. Rob is a writer based in New York City. Welcome, Rob.
Hi, Ashley. Hi, Michael.
So, Rob, when you sent this idea over, I was completely intrigued because I moved to Williamsburg in 2004, and I used to go to Bamonte's, and it was kind of the cool hipster spot back then, and now it's even more so. So take us to this fabulous red sauce Italian restaurant in the middle of Williamsburg. What's it all about?
So Bamonte's is what Carbone wishes it would be. I mean, Carbone is trying to kind of like create the Bamonte's vibe, and it's been open for 125 years. Next year, it opened in the year 1900. And it's just a classic Italian, old school red sauce restaurant. There's a lot of lore. One of the earliest things that I would tell my friends about is that back in the day, most restaurants have a coat check. They had a gun check, apparently, as legend has it. So notorious characters would go in and they would have to, check their gun at the door. But it's the kind of place you walk in, and it's white tablecloths. The waiters are all of a certain age. They're dressed in suits. You sit down, they serve long, hot green peppers and Italian bread. The waiters are also no nonsense. It's like you can't ask for, they have a wine list, but it's just like, hey, what do you want? We have what we have. We've been serving it for 125 years. And I moved to Williamsburg actually 10 years ago. And I took my parents there one weekend, and I waited for the right time to go because I knew it was going to be a special moment, my first time there. I was just kind of taken aback. I mean, the food is good, but I think a lot of people go for this really interesting atmosphere that is just so New York. I think it's the same reason why people go to Lucali, where it can't be anywhere else. It's quintessential Brooklyn.
Rob, it wasn't all that long ago too that Williamsburg was still a Brooklyn neighborhood. Now there's an Hermes store, there's a Whole Foods, there's an Equinox. It's like, it's been so developed in the last 25 years that it's probably unrecognizable to some residents, but Bamonte's hasn't changed. How does it fit into the firmament of the new Brooklyn?
I think in this age when people are seeking authenticity, and now Williamsburg, has, a Sweet Green, Chipotle and kind of like very polished restaurants. The new generations that are coming into the neighborhood are seeking this kind of old school vibe that they've only seen on TV and in the movies, And what I find so interesting is that, a restaurant that's been around for that long and doesn't change, you would think that they don't bring in new crowds, but every time I go and every time I pass by, it's a tough reservation. A lot of people are waiting, and then you're in the dining room, and the most interesting thing is that you see the tech bros of Williamsburg and the finance bros of Williamsburg and the younger generation there alongside people who have been living in the neighborhood for literally 60, 70 years. And I don't even think supermarkets have the same demographic, because I feel like the new generation of residents go to places like Whole Foods and Trader Joe's, and the other ones go to the supermarkets that have been there. So it's kind of an outlier in the neighborhood where it really brings everybody together. And I can't think of another place I want to say even beyond Williamsburg where, someone who's 25 and someone who's 65 or 70 gets the same thing out of going there.
One thing from your story that I love, being a guy who went there when it was only probably 100 years old, happy to see they still have the valet parking, because we drove up there just to experience the valet parking when we used to go there. But also that, speaking of tech bros, they're apparently probably not on Resi, because you detail they still have the big old reservation book with everything done in pencil and pen there, right?
Oh, yeah. And as I was chatting with Anthony, who is like the patriarch, and Lisa, his daughter, who kind of runs the day-to-day operation with her sister, Nicole, I'm chatting with them and the phone's ringing off the hook and she's running back and forth and, flipping through, a regular old reservation book and okay, and what's your name, and 7:30 and writing it down and crossing things out. forget about Resi. Even trying to set this up was, as Ashley, it was a long process. I mean, I called them to, just thinking, can I ask for an interview? And my first snag was that they were closed the entire month of August. And I happened to call on August 2nd. So then I waited until September. And then I called in September and they said, hey, the owner's only here, or she could take your call Wednesday afternoon. Call next Wednesday. And then a week later I would call and they would say, she just stepped out, but call next Wednesday. And this went on for so long that Ashley, I don't know if you thought that I was just kind of like slacking on my assignment that you gave me, or I was kind of because I was like, oh my God, I don't want you to kill this piece. And my God, can you believe like from August to now is how long it took to put this together? I mean, it takes I'm sure a shorter time to speak to the president.
I don't know. I also love that, as you detail, I'm not a cigarette smoker, but they still got the old cigarette machine right up front, the ones you had to pull those handles on. So, it's a nice time travel. It's
so true. And I think, you walk in and even in the window, just the font of the name Bamonte's, and the old wine bottles and the old pictures of, it's not like you walk in Joe's Pizza and there's pictures of, Joe Jonas and Jimmy Fallon. Here, it's like the guy that plays Sollozzo in The Godfather 2 and the shortstop for the Yankees in 1981. It's like real New York characters.
Rob, we have to talk about the food. For those who haven't been there, what do you recommend? What's your favorite? And is it as good as it's always been?
I've been there on many occasions. And I've gotten takeout there during the pandemic. And, the food is what you would think an old school Italian restaurant would have. Chicken Parmesan, spaghetti and meatballs, eggplant rollatini. I would say there are these dishes that aren't, essentially cool that, not to, talk about carbone again, but I'm not sure carbone has like escarole and beans. That's like a really old school dish that, is, you look at it, but most people look at escarole on a menu, they don't even know what that is. But it's a nice hearty soup with beans. When you go in, don't get chicken Parmesan. I mean, the chicken Parmesan is fantastic, but get the things that a lot of restaurants, they used to be prevalent in Italian cuisine, but most of the time you go in a modern Italian restaurant, they're not going to have stuff like, escarole and beans, or they have like peas, let's say, with cooked with prosciutto or something. Or, when you order a coffee at the end of the meal and get Zambuca, and then you put the Zambuca in the coffee. These are old school things that have kind of faded out of relevance, that the kind of things that I absolutely love. Have those hot peppers when they put them on the table, but be very careful because they are very hot. And you might say, oh, I can handle a hot pepper. Well, guess what? They'll burn your mouth and you'll get a reminder of them the next day too, but they're absolutely worth it.
Yeah, you don't want to look like a rookie, going in hard, biting the peppers. It just is, because all eyes, it's one of those rooms where all eyes are kind of watching you all the time. And it's like, if you get the table, you go there, you got to pretend like you know what you're doing. So, but don't make those rookie mistakes.
I mean, suffice to say, the people watching is spectacular.
Well, Rob, thank you so much. It's such a great story. We love the way you tell it. And now, I don't know about you guys, I've got a hankering for some eggplant parm.
I'll meet you there, but I'll call in the reservation. I'll see what we can get.
Please do. Thanks so much, Rob.
Thank you, Ashley. Thanks, Mike.
This award season, consider Conclave. Rafe Fiennes and a stellar ensemble cast burn up the screen in director Edward Berger's stunning cinematic achievement, Conclave. Hailed by AFI as one of the year's best pictures and nominated for 11 Critics' Choice Awards, including Best Picture of the Year. Conclave, your choice changes everything. Oh, all right. Well, Michael, in case you're not able to travel to Brooklyn and instead you would prefer to time travel to the First World War, we have a marvelous essay in the issue this week about Ernest Hemingway. Intriguing as ever after over 100 years.
Yeah, I love this story because if everyone's a fan of A Farewell to Arms, one of the masterpieces of the last 100 years. And Amanda's just got this brilliant sort of decoding of how Hemingway found inspiration in his first marriage for this love story.
Yeah, who knew? Amanda Vaill is the author of several books, including Hotel Florida, Truth, Love, and Death in the Spanish Civil War. Welcome, Amanda.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
So, Amanda, you've written a new introduction to a new vintage classics edition of Ernest Hemingway's masterpiece, A Farewell to Arms. And when you were rereading it, did you discover anything in particular that you hadn't caught on the first many times that you had read the novel?
Well, I was, of course, looking to see what handles I could grasp to say something new about this book, which thousands of people, much more expert than I, have said extraordinary things about. And I read through the novel again, and it, of course, impressed me with its brilliance, its structure, its the prose, which is always such a knockout with Hemingway. Every time, it's just like a gut punch. You think, how did this guy do this? But I kept hearing this strange voice it was like seeing an actress in some movie and you think, oh, I know who that is, but you don't know. And you have to go to IMDb to figure out who it is. And I was hearing this voice in the voice of Catherine, the main character. She sounded so familiar. And all of a sudden it struck me that maybe the person she sounded like was Hemingway's first wife, Hadley, whose voice he had so indelibly rendered in A Movable Feast. And I went back and reread A Movable Feast, and my God, there it was. It was the same voice. And I thought, well, this is very strange because, of course, this novel isn't supposed to be about Hadley. This novel is supposed to be about Hemingway's lost first love. What is this?
And tell us about that first love that we thought we knew about.
When Hemingway was an ambulance driver in World War I, he was wounded in Italy and was nursed back, quite badly wounded, actually. He was an 18-year-old kid, and he was evacuated, sent to the hospital in Milan, and was nursed back to health by a nurse called Agnes von Karofsky, who was an American. She was older. She was very alluring. He fell in love with her. They had a romance, which was very serious on his part and probably less so on hers. And he thought when the armistice came and he was sent back to the U.S. that she would follow him and they would get married. And she didn't. She wrote him breaking up. She wrote him a Dear John letter telling him he was too young for her and she was going to marry this major. He was heartbroken, completely heartbroken. And he began writing fiction using this sad story as the germ of some of the pieces that he wrote.
And yet,
he
did find love, as we know, in many other forms throughout his life, with Hadley being, one of the stories we know best. But tell us a little bit about their relationship. What do we know about how it unfolded?
Hadley was a bit older, just a little bit older than Hemingway. He seemed to have this thing for slightly older women. And she was a pianist. She'd had a very unhappy childhood, was from St. Louis. They fell in love. They married. They went to Paris with all the young expats in the early 20s. They lived on Hadley's trust fund. She had a small trust fund, and they lived on that and his meager wages as a journalist, and were, as he said in A Movable Feast, very poor and very happy. And it was a young, youthful marriage, and it went the way a lot of youthful marriages do with guys who become very successful. He became very successful, and a friend of Hadley's, a very smart, dashing journalist called Pauline Pfeiffer, moved in on Hemingway, and he moved on to her and left Hadley behind. And they got divorced, which was very painful to Hadley. And Hemingway and Pauline relocated to America, where she came from. And it was at the time that happened that Hemingway began to write A Farewell to Arms. And he's writing that novel in the, I guess, sort of aftermath of the breakup with Hadley and during the time of the building of his relationship with Pauline.
As you note in your essay, it's his third book. He's done Time. He's done Sun Also Rises. As you detail, he's kind of struggling with this one a little bit. And then there's this kind of creative breakthrough. So what is the shift as you see it and his breakthrough to get this book that becomes a masterpiece?
What seemed to happen is that Hemingway had been trying to write a kind of a father-son picaresque, and it just wasn't gelling. And he kept starting it and stopping and starting and stopping. And it was going nowhere. This was while he was still in Europe. And then just as he's on the point of leaving everything, leaving Hadley, leaving, his old marriage, his old friends, his old setting behind, and also the literary world that had birthed him and that he had then come to sort of dominate. He suddenly thought maybe he would return to the story that he had noodled around with before of Agnes, the breakup, and his failed romance with her. So he goes back to this, thinking, maybe I could write a longer novel about this. And he makes a tragedy out of it, a real full 5-act tragedy, in which the callow young lieutenant, who was himself, falls in love with the nurse. And then the two of them, seeking a better life, seeking to escape from the war and all the horrors of it, try to run away to Switzerland, where she's pregnant and she dies horribly in childbirth, and he is left alone. And it is a great, great tragedy. Well, I kept wondering, what is it that you had to do to write this novel? The 2 books that he'd written previously, collection of stories in our times, brilliant, episodic vignettes. Then there is San Also Rises, a sort of extended travelogue and character sketch that is set in Spain at the fiesta in Pamplona, and became, it was like the Bright Lights big city of its day, or the Lesson Zero of its day. It was the thing that all the young people felt was incredibly cool. And it introduced this generation of disaffected young expats to older fuddy-duddy readers. And nothing really prepares you for Sun Also Rises, for A Farewell to Arms, because he has not written this kind of sustained character development before. But somehow it was as if he had to put behind him all of the brilliant episodic storytelling that he had excelled in, the fragmentary view of the world that was part of the modernist ethos. He had to put all that behind him in order to write a novel like this. And in a weird way, I began to suspect he sort of had to kill that world. He had to kill it off. And he had to kill off Hadley. And she dies, or the Hadley substitute dies in the book. And in this novel, he does this amazingly odd thing to Hadley, which is to turn her into the tragic heroine and the victim of fate in this novel. And weirdly, it happens in Lausanne, which is a very significant place. The hospital where Catherine dies in the novel is located in Lausanne in Switzerland. But Lausanne was a very significant place for Hemingway because it was where he was when Hadley confessed to him that traveling to join him from Paris, she had lost a valise containing all of his early manuscripts that she had been bringing to him. And he said he was so angry at that. He said in A Movable Feast, he says, I remember what I did in the night after I found it was true. And it feels to me like Lausanne got picked for the site of Catherine's death for a lot of reasons, and that was one of them. And Hemingway spent his whole career making art out of things that had happened to him, but he did it in part for personal ends, not just for artistic ones. It felt to me like when he says in A Movable Feast that he sees Hadley as the heroine of the stories in A Movable Feast. And I think that's what he's trying to say there, that she had given him something greater even than her forbearance and support in the early days of their marriage, but that she had given him the gift of this transformation from a novelist, a very promising writer of experimental and very highly regarded, but not sustained fiction, that she gave him the gift of that, of his transformation into the writer he wanted to become. That was a gift that he owed her for the rest of his life, and he knew him.
Well, Amanda, thank you so much. What a fascinating essay and insight. And we really appreciate it. And Hemingway fans over the world rejoice. If you pick up the new edition of A Farewell to Arms from Vintage Classics, you can hear even more about this. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Amanda.
There's only one place to discover a global snapshot of the current cultural scene. Airmail's Arts Intel Report, our international research tool for what to do and where and when to do it, is user-friendly, continuously updated, and meticulously curated. Arts Intel is handy at home, on the road, and when you're planning your next trip. It also includes indispensable lists of restaurants and hotels in key cities around the world, recommended by our well-traveled experts. Explore Arts Intel at airmail.news/arts-intel, and be sure to sign up for our Week in Culture newsletter, which is published every Wednesday afternoon at airmail.news/WIC. I'm Chris Garrett, an Airmail Deputy Editor, and I never leave home without it. Bon voyage.
I know you have something irresistible you can recommend to us to pass the time.
Yeah, you know what? It's been, one of the themes I think feel like last few months of me watching stuff is espionage, spy, as we've said, all the way from Slow Horses up to the remake of The Bureau, which is now the agency. But one that I sort of rediscovered over break is Eddie Redmayne in the remake of The Jackal. Have you seen it at all, Ashley?
I have not seen it, but Eddie Redmayne can do no wrong, in my opinion.
Well, he's pretty great in this. It's Frederick Forsyth wrote the book. It became a great movie in the 60s. That was about the assassination of Charles de Gaulle. It's updated, and Eddie Redmayne is sort of like probably one of the most well-dressed assassins ever. I mean, there should be a whole sort of like sub-theme now about well-dressed assassins and how you want to look like that. But he kind of, sort of takes his bag around Europe and sort of update of this. He's a gun for hire, and you've got an agent trying to track him down, played by Lashana Lynch, who's awesome in this. It's The Jackal, and you can see it on Peacock Plus. And you, my dear?
Oh, I'm sorry to say, I've been diving back into the past, and I've been rewatching Wolf Hall. Did you ever watch it? I'm sure you did.
I did. And the second season is coming out here. It's already in the UK, but it's not out here in the US. Just want to warn you.
Exactly. Okay, so I don't, no spoiler alert, although, everybody has read these Hilary Mantel novels anyway, but if you've never seen the first season, it was broadcast on BBC Two in 2015. It's a 6-part series about the rise of Thomas Cromwell, a lawyer who came from rather humble beginnings in London and ended up being an important minister to Henry VIII. But it's a marvelous, marvelous, marvelous series. You're going to love it. It's got Mark Rylance and Damian Lewis and Claire Foy and many other actors that we love. But get ready because the second season is coming soon. And let's just say, I have not watched the entire thing yet, but everyone in the UK is talking about it, and it's about to come to the US shores immediately.
Yeah, I'm excited because, and you're exactly right. This is the perfect moment to catch up. I've avoided all the spoilers. I just peeked at the headlines, and it's getting rave reviews the second season. So everyone should get ready. It's going to be brilliant.
Yeah, and I think actually it should be required that you watch the first season again before even delving into the second, because almost 10 years have elapsed.
That's true. Got to refresh yourself.
Well, on that note, we wish you all a wonderful start to 2025. Thank you so much for joining us. We'd like to thank our sponsor, Focus Features. Michael, will you please read us out?
Absolutely, and Happy New Year to everyone. Morning Meeting is produced by Airplay Productions and edited by Jesse Cannon. Our co-editors are Graydon Carter and Alexander Stanley. Our chief operating officer is Bill Keenan. And our deputy editors are Ashley Baker, Chris Garrett, Nathan King, Julie Vitale, and Ash Carter. Our CMO is Emily Davis, and our music supervisor is Randall Poster. Our theme music is The Cute Monster by the Buddy Collette Quintet. A new edition of Airmail is published every Saturday, so please subscribe to Airmail and enjoy all of our stories on airmail.news, which we update every day. You can also find us on Twitter and Instagram at Airmail Weekly, but we will be back here next Saturday with another edition of Morning Meeting. And in the meantime, be sure to subscribe at Spotify or Apple Music. But most of all, thank you again for joining us.